All right, well, welcome everyone. It's good to have you all here. We can get started. Welcome to NYU Washington, D.C., in case you're wondering where you are tonight. We are honored to have tonight's panel of esteemed activists and policy advisors in commemoration of National Food Day, moderated by our very own faculty, Vicki Keichel. I don't kiss everybody who's the moderator, just the nice ones. We would like to welcome our colleagues and students at NYU New York who are watching via live stream, and thank you for joining us. The event tonight is sponsored by Sweet Green, which has generously donated 2 gift certificates for 2 lucky audience members at both places. At a drawing at the receptions following our event, the winners will be announced. A special thank you tonight as well to Lauren Sinclair and Shruti Ramadugu from our DC staff who helped organize the panel. Vicki is one of our star faculty. For the past 3 semesters since our program's launch, she has taught our course, Globalizing Social Activism. She is a lifetime Washingtonian and a LEED certified architect. Her passion for DC life and sustainability is contagious. In addition to being a beloved teacher to our students, and we know this from their evaluations, so we're not making it up, she's encouraged our students to use our building, which we're going for LEED certification, as a living classroom. She, Lauren Sinclair, and current students are working on a green grant proposal for our building, which includes on-site food production. Everyone cross your fingers. Marlon Bruckner serves as founder and principal of Global Strategic Partners, where he has worked with clients across a variety of sectors, including technology, energy, education, and agriculture. He is also founder of Food Policy US and co-founder of Forever View Farm. Mr. Buckner serves on the board of the Washington, D.C. Coalition for the Homeless, Potomac College, and Common Market, a Philadelphia-based, mission-driven local food distributor. Lauren Schwederbiel, did I get the name right?
Close enough.
Oh, good. All right, close enough. Sorry about that. Is the executive director of DC Greens. Lauren has a Master of Philosophy in Anthropology from NYU with a focus on culture and media, and she's the mother of 2 future DC public school students and serves on the Mayor's Commission for Healthy Youth in Schools. Mike Curtin is the Chief Executive Officer for DC Central Kitchen. Mike serves as the Chair Emeritus of the Restaurant Association, Metropolitan Washington, and board member for the Common Market in Philadelphia. He is also on the advisory board of DC Greens, the Leadership Council of DC Hunger Solution, and an advisory board for the Center for Health and the Global Environment at Harvard Medical School. Pam Hess is the Executive Director of the Arcadia Center for Sustainable Food and Agriculture. Prior to this, she worked at Flavor and Food Shed magazines that focused on increasing the demand for and availability of local sustainable food in the capital food shed. Locable, I've made a new word. She has worked in Washington as a career national security journalist with side trips to Afghanistan and Iraq and a brief foray into politics on Capitol Hill. I think you've earned your stripes. Tonight's discussion is meant as a launching point to survey our local context, examine local and national best practices, and imagine ways for citizens and stakeholders to positively impact community change. Thank you to our audience and panelists for engaging in this important topic. And I'll turn it over to Vicki.
Thanks, Michael. Hi, NYU, Washington Square folks. For the benefit of my students who are here and students in New York City, I'd like you to begin by talking about why you are in this field, what your reasons are for embracing food activism and the issues you do. Why don't we start with Marlon?
Well, thanks very much, and thanks to NYU for hosting this. We really appreciate the opportunity. Among the principal reasons that I've become involved in this area of endeavor is I actually grew up in Saskatchewan in Canada, and I had family members that farmed, and farming was a part of our community, but it was never something that I really saw myself doing, and life progressed, but I found that over time I became increasingly interested and concerned and indeed passionate about the need for food system reform, but I also had private sector experience. I worked in the technology industry for many years, as well as on Capitol Hill, and I thought that the nexus of that private sector experience and public policy experience could put me in a unique position to help serve the cause of food system reform in the ways that I wanted to work. And so it was that background and experience that brought me to where we are today in foodpolicy.us and Forever View Farms in particular.
Interesting path. So Lauren, what about you?
Well, my story is a little bit of a cliche in some ways. I got involved and interested in food by reading The Omnivore's Dilemma, like probably 90% of the people today who kind of had their eyes opened by that book. I happened to read it at a time when I was leaving working at Sesame Street to start, I was on maternity leave. So I had just had a baby, and I was thinking about where I lived and thinking about the food choices for my children down the line. And I had a friend who worked at Bancroft Elementary School, which was the school that was selected to plant the first White House garden. So she went to go plant this White House garden and came back, was the art teacher there, sort of charged with managing the school garden at Bancroft, and realized very quickly that there was very little support for teachers who were trying to actually integrate gardens into their standard curriculum. So she and I were talking, and it was a very exciting time in DC. City Council was getting ready to launch the Healthy Schools Act, and there were a lot of working groups, and the more that we got involved in these discussions in DC around farm to school issues, things that were happening in the cafeteria, school gardens, the Farmers Market Coalition in DC, we realized that there were some key gaps, and so we co-founded DC Greens really to find creative ways to fill those needs that we saw in the landscape.
Mike, what about you? Another native Washingtonian.
Right. Well, I've been involved with food for a long time. I actually was in the restaurant business before I came to DC Central Kitchen, working at several places. I actually owned my own restaurant for about 5 years, which I say now is my first experience in the nonprofit sector, was owning my own restaurant. But that brought me to DC Central Kitchen, and obviously DC Central Kitchen has been using food as a tool to strengthen bodies, empower minds, and build communities for almost 25 years now, but more on almost a social service kind of necessity empowerment model. And interestingly enough, we got into this sustainable local agriculture piece not because we were thinking we wanted to be the green people or the sustainable people or the local people. It was just a smart economic decision for us to start looking to local farmers and purchasing product that was otherwise going to go to waste because it was aesthetically or geometrically challenged. So for years we had been working on waste at one end of the food stream, and almost accidentally just came upon the notion that the more tragic and robust waste happens at the beginning of the food stream. So we've melded these two sides together, not only to increase the nutrition and the appeal of our meals to shelters, transitional homes, and halfway houses, but it's really put us now into a whole other realm of social enterprise, dealing particularly with locally sourced scratch-cooked meals in schools, and then now delivering fresh fruits and vegetables and snacks to corner stores in the city's food deserts.
Pam, your personal pathway to this issue.
It's a long way from the mean streets of Kabul to here. Like Marlon, grew up in a world where food mattered. My mom had a garden. We were not allowed to eat tomatoes out of season. We picked blackberries every summer, and I thought everybody else grew up this way. And as I grew older, I understood that that was not the case. And I understood also what was missing from those people's lives, which is that atavistic human celebration that comes with eating food in season. So that's my childhood. Like Lauren, I read Omnivore's Dilemma in 2006, and that really set me on fire and opened my eyes to the food system. I don't think I knew that a food system existed until I read that book, and then I consequently read everything I could get my hands on. All this time, I was a national security journalist. I worked around the corner with, I think, somebody that you guys know, Seth Borenstein, sat right next to me. And I covered national security, a lot of CIA, a lot of torture. I can tell you the circular arrow probable of a joint direct attack munition. None of this has anything to do with food. But the skills that journalism gave to me, which is asking questions and trying to understand how all the pieces fit together, is what I then applied to the food world when I switched from national security journalism to food journalism. And I took on this lovely local magazine that now no longer exists called Flavor. And I dove in on the beginning part of the food system, which is the farmers and then the chefs who used their stuff. And I really came to understand and appreciate the magic that farmers work and the importance that they have socially obviously with our food environmentally, humanely, both to other humans and to animals, and nutritionally. The more I covered what it was they were doing, the more I understood that I just needed to be a part of it. And then Arcadia came to me around this time last year and said, why don't you just come work for us? And I said, okay. So I sort of went from having a backseat and being an observer and a reporter on the food system to hopefully really making a big difference here in Washington. And what Arcadia does, which is perfect for me, and where I came from, is addresses the entire food system, but in a local way. There's lots of people working in the food space in Washington especially, and there's not just these groups, but so many others doing really important work. And I think what makes Arcadia a little bit different is that we are touching every part of it. We have a farm, we train farmers, we buy from local farms, we distribute food, we teach people how to cook food, we teach kids how to grow food and their parents, and are working food access from every angle that we can. So you can't just teach a kid to like beets if their parents can't find the beets in their neighborhood and can't afford them. And if they can find them and can afford them, if they don't know how to cook them, you've just sort of lost that kid. And so when Arcadia was started in 2010, it was the idea that you have to touch every piece of this. Otherwise, you're going to drop a lot of important balls along the way. So what we're hoping to do at Arcadia is come up with a solution, lots of different experiments to see what works and what really moves the ball and can improve the local food system, and then hopefully spread those lessons around the country, and lots of other organizations can step in and learn from the work that we're doing.
Marlon, you haven't talked about what foodpolicy.us really does. Can you talk a little bit about that? We've heard about DC Central Kitchen and Arcadia Center now, but you and Lauren should talk a little bit about your organizations.
Yeah, well, foodpolicy.us, foodpolicy.us is a web-based platform that's designed to promote transparency and dialogue around food system issues. And so we've had the opportunity to go out into the community and film lots and lots of different activists and entrepreneurs and policymakers. We've developed content that's designed to provide to serve as an educational resource. So it really is a multifaceted platform to promote transparency and dialogue in our food system, and it's sort of one leg of the three-legged stool of our project. Forever View Farms, which is essentially an experimental farm that I've begun in Central Virginia, is working with foodpolicy.us, and down in Forever View we've developed a sustainable, an aquaponics greenhouse, several thousand square feet, that's designed to promote and incubate innovation in a controlled environment agriculture space. The policy leg is Global Strategic Partners, and there we've worked on issues that folks have talked about here, whether it's farm to school, whether it's different parts of the Farm Bill. So foodpolicy.us is really the platform that's designed, as I said, to promote dialogue and transparency. The other two legs are sort of the practical elements of the work that we do in food systems. We try to take a comprehensive and interdisciplinary approach.
Lauren, what about DC Greens?
DC Greens connects communities to healthy food in the nation's capital. That's the headline. We also connect communities to each other so that we can work collectively towards a more just local food system. And what that really means on the ground, we also have three legs. We have our school garden programs where we are supporting, DC has about 93 school gardens. I don't know if you're aware of that. It's a huge number of school gardens. And as has happened across the country, gardens are installed without a lot of thought towards how they're going to be integrated into the curriculum or how teachers can best maximize them to sort of cure all societal ills as they've been built to be able to do. So what we do in DC is we have created a professional network of garden-based educators. About 50 are currently participating in our Growing Garden Teachers workshop series. We collaborate with nonprofits across the city to train them. We bring in national experts to train them. We basically have a themed monthly workshop where we're giving them curriculum materials, we give them interns, we give them seedlings, basically anything that they could possibly need to make sure that they're using best practices. Our middle branch is our food access programs. So in DC, we are running the fruit and vegetable prescription program where we've partnered with Upper Cardozo Unity Clinic, and doctors there are writing prescriptions for fresh fruits and vegetables that can be redeemed at farmers markets in the city. We've had amazing results from that program and are really looking to expand that citywide in the coming years. We also double SNAP and WIC purchases at farmers markets in DC. And we run the DC Farm to School network, so trying to create experiential opportunities for kids in DC to connect with food. Again, sort of working, as Pam mentioned, sort of treating the local food system as a system that has multiple parts, working across multiple institutions, trying to bring people together and work with the existing infrastructure. Again, 93 existing school gardens, 40 farmers markets in DC. That's a huge number of opportunities for deepening food access and food education. So we're trying to bring people together to work smarter collaboratively.
You're all doing policy and practice. I didn't expect that you would be farming too, but you're all involved in these kind of multivalent activities where you're working it on all levels. So we've got this issue tonight of the food desert, which is, I don't know, talk a little bit about that. That's almost a spatial thing in this town, and certainly in other towns. I would think New York City has, a number of them also, and you guys probably on the square are thinking about this issue too. But how does the work you do actually aim to deal with this very kind of, seems very intransigent, spatially dug in thing of the food desert? Where are they, and what are you doing about it? Yeah, Pam's waving. Good.
Very excited. One of our, probably our most public program gets directly at the problem of food deserts. It's our mobile market. It's a refurbished school bus. The food that we grow on our farm, we aggregate with food from 12 other local farms, and we put it on a school bus, which is loaded inside with freezers and fridges and baskets and racks. And we go into neighborhoods that don't have a farmer's market or a grocery store, that are low income. These are called low food access neighborhoods, and we do a regular weekly market there. We're usually there for about 2 hours. We double SNAP and WIC. We do cooking demonstrations there because a lot of folks haven't had access to fresh ingredients for a couple of generations. There was a lot of grocery store consolidation in the 80s and 90s that devastated cities around the country, where we used to have independent grocery stores serving a neighborhood. They were bought out. You have massive grocery stores now in the suburbs where you can maximize the amount of money you get out of everybody who comes in there with their big car and lots of bags, but very few grocery stores independently owned now serving in the cities. So we go to those neighborhoods and we show up, and it's really incredible the response that we've had. There's this notion, there's a backward notion. Because folks in these neighborhoods have been relying on convenience stores mostly, people, regardless of income, won't travel on foot more than half a mile to get food. It's a proven fact. And I don't care if you're a millionaire or you are on food stamps, that's what you do. And I can point you to lots of studies that will show you that way. So you need to have food in your neighborhood in order for you to eat healthy. Most of the food has been convenience stores, and most of them, except for the ones that Mike is working with, don't carry fresh fruits and vegetables. So we make these things available, we make them affordable, we make them understandable by teaching people how to cook. We've got a cookbook coming out that combines WIC staples with the fresh seasonal produce that we do. And in our first year, which was last year, at 8 stops, during 26 market weeks, we sold $43,000 worth of food. And this year, we're selling $60,000 worth of food. And it's a great Band-Aid in this way, in that these neighborhoods, and we're limited by physics, there's one bus and a limited amount of staff, these neighborhoods are getting addressed. But what we're trying to do is to show corner stores and grocery stores and farmers markets that there actually is an appetite for this food in these neighborhoods. the backwards notion that I was talking about is that because convenience foods, packaged foods have been the only thing available, that's what folks have eaten. So anyone looking at that neighborhood would say, these people don't want us here. We're not going to come. We can't make any money. In a traditional farmer's market, as from my work previously, a farmer needs to expect to make about $1,000 on a market day for it to be worth their while, because they're getting up at 2 a.m, they're harvesting, they're spending all day. All of the food that they have out is lost if they haven't sold it. You can't sell food that's been sitting in the sun for 6 or 8 hours. So we are trying to gather the data to show you can make money with this, and these people do want fresh, local food, sustainably grown, beautiful stuff. That beauty of a fresh tomato in the height of summer is the same whether you're a millionaire or you're on SNAP. It's a great food is a universal experience, and that's what we learn every week with the mobile market.
Mike.
I think that, so absolutely, and so much of the stuff that Pam was talking about, we're all crossing over each other, which is a wonderful, beautiful thing, that we're all learning from each other, helping each other, and continuing to make these touch points. So there's a spatial issue, but in many, many ways, it's racial, it's financial, it's economic, and there's a significant amount of justice issues involved. So just, I usually don't like to do this, but these are so striking that I think it's really important to note. So if we look at Ward 3, which is sort of the wealthy part of DC, and Ward 8, which is the most economically underserved and impoverished area of our city. Ward 3, median income 128 grand. Ward 8, 29. Obesity rate in Ward 3, 48. In Ward 8, 72. Type 2 diabetes in Ward 3, 8%. Type 2 in Ward 8, 18. African American in Ward 3, 6%. In Ward 8, 92%. SNAP recipients in Ward 3, 528. In Ward 8, 43,000. Grocery stores in Ward 3, 11. Grocery stores in Ward 8, 3. And in Ward 3, there's one grocery store per 7,300 people. And in Ward 8, there's one per 23,000 people. Mm-hmm. So this idea that again, these areas are just incredibly underserved, and business in many ways has created this food desert problem, and it makes sense. If I'm a guy and my business is delivering vegetables, delivering tomatoes, I get paid this, or it costs me the same amount of money to drop off 100 cases or 1,000 cases at a Whole Foods as it does to drop off one or a half at a convenience store in Southeast. So I'm going to do Wards 3 in these big grocery stores all day long, and I'm not going to bother with this. And that's what creates these food deserts, not only here, but around the country. So the work that we've been involved in now for about 2 years with the corner stores is to really leverage what we can do sort of as a nonprofit and meld it with this idea of social enterprise and business to run a business, to run a wholesale delivery business, but support it in a way that business can't through philanthropy. And the method that we've developed is a subsidized method. So when we go into stores, and as Pam said, people will say, that no one's going to buy anything fresh in that neighborhood, in that store. Well, if there's nothing fresh in that store, those people will be right 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. And then the merchants will say, well, the only refrigeration I have is for my beer, and I'm not losing that space. I don't have other shelf space. So we say, okay, we'll give you a refrigerator. We'll brand it nicely. We'll give you shelving. We'll brand it. We'll do demos. We'll do community outreach events. We'll put out recipe cards. And for a couple months, we're going to give you this food for free. Develop a market, no financial risk. And then we start stepping the price up a little bit. And after 6 months, they're paying close to wholesale. But with the ability for them to mark up their product 35%, but we cap it. So if they want to be in the program, they want the refrigeration, they want the shelving, they want the product, they can't gouge. So it's affordable. So it's not just fresh, it's affordable. And every single month that we've been doing this, we've seen the sales increase. And using that experience, And there's a whole other host of other things we're doing now to make it a lot easier for the merchants. We've evolved into some of this stuff. That's why I brought these. We're doing trail mix. We're doing value-added fresh cut fruit now. Snacks, fruit and veg and dip kind of things that we've got in processing and packaging machines. And the demand continues to grow. It's remarkable. And I guess the other important piece of that whole program is that we're featuring our stores in areas where we serve locally sourced scratch-cooked school meals. So we do a lot of work with the students. And with Lauren's group in the YMCA, we're starting to do teacher education now. Every Friday, we do a new fresh vegetable with the kids prepared 3 ways. They vote, and that's the one that gets on the menu. And we make sure that what's on the menu in school is going to be available on the shelves in the corner stores in that neighborhood. And here are the recipe cards to cook it. So again, this holistic, all these different touch points, so that people can get the food in school, get the food at the corner stores, get the food at the farmer's market, get it through the mobile market. All these touch points are going to have a tremendous impact.
Just to build on it, I mean, I think schools are an incredibly important part of this equation. DC has the highest rate of participation in breakfast in the classroom of, it's the highest, #1 in the country. There's also a very robust summer meals program here. So, in a lot of, schools end up being very kind of key feeding sites, and school food has improved dramatically in DC, thanks to a number of factors, support from City Council and more attention to the fact coming from the White House as well. One thing that we've been doing, we launched a pilot this fall, and it's been so successful that it's going to go like wildfire, is started a school garden market program where we have 6 pilot schools across the city. They're schools that have gardens, and the kids are actually creating farmers markets at their schools at pickup time. So I've sort of been saying, like, move over bake sale, because basically they're taking produce from their garden, and then we supplement that with produce from a local farmer that we purchase at wholesale prices for the kids. There's actually an online ordering system, so the kids get to decide what's going to be best for their community. They get to order the whole thing. It's delivered to the school, and then they're selling it to their community. They get to mark it up however much they want. They're completely in charge of all of the kind of math behind it and all of the sales. We're actually in the process, the government shutdown put a little damper on this, but we're about to get, I heard today, SNAP terminals for each of the schools so that they'll be able to actually accept food stamps at the school at pickup time, with the kids basically being ambassadors in the community for purchasing healthy foods. And that has just been an incredibly exciting program. Every single school that is participating in our program has turned a profit every single market. That's a weekly market. It's incredible. So I feel like this is the kind of thing that can really take off and be an additional touch point in this landscape that we're all trying to build together. The prescription program is another piece of this. I think that as more and more clinics are interested in getting on board with this program, and I'm getting calls from doctors, on a weekly basis who want to be able to participate in this program, that is going to provide even more access to fresh local foods. And we are playing, there are 40 farmers markets and we have the mobile market, but that's not everywhere. That's a lot of places, but it's not within a half a mile of every single person. So, one of the things that Mike and I have been talking about is trying to pilot that prescription program at the healthy corner stores. I was in a conversation today about, thinking about, why can't this be at a grocery store where you have a prescription that's able to be redeemable? So I think all of these things, this is an incredibly exciting time in DC. I think we can all agree. And we've all just kind of been finding new ways to collaborate with each other and really trying to recognize our collective strengths and come together to really address the problem as a nonprofit community.
Before I make what will be a deliberately provocative, but I hope constructive remark, I want to just say that at foodpolicy.us we have been really excited to highlight the work that all of the folks here are doing. And as I said earlier, Mike and I serve on the board of Common Market. As far as I'm concerned, he should get the Medal of Freedom for what he has done in this town. Simple as that.
Seriously.
He just should.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. But let
You
me...
talked about board of directors.
But I want to kind of pick up on some of the themes that my colleagues have talked about here. I think our alleged food access problem here in DC, and I say alleged, is actually not a problem of access at all. If you live in Washington, DC, you don't, there's no access problem. If you have three things, you can get all of the fresh, locally produced, organic, sustainable, the best food anywhere. If you have three things: credit card, a cell phone or some other smart device, and an address. The problem is that too many poor people in this town have none of those. The problem that we have is not an access problem, it's a poverty problem. And Mike's data points, I think, highlight that absolutely beautifully. I live in Ward 2. I have all three of the things that I mentioned. I can get anything I want, and I don't have to move 5 feet from my flat screen TV. So the reason I raise this is because what we're trying to do in the work that we're doing, both at Forever View Farms in Central Virginia and at foodpolicy.us and in the policy work that we've done, and we've supported as a political matter, we've worked on SNAP incentives and the veggie prescription. These programs are absolutely first rate. WIC and farmers market promotion programs, these are all absolutely mission critical, and they are part of the diverse ecosystem that is the work that we are doing in food system reform. The theory of the case that we're working to create here is that we believe that fundamentally, that structurally, food system reform offers us the single best opportunity it's the single best anti-poverty tool that we have available to us. And what's more, the argument that we're making is that food system reform can be a catalyst for more significant health creation and wealth creation than any other systemic reform that we might undertake, whether that's as a policy matter, as an economic matter, as a philanthropic matter, what have you. So what we're trying to do is literally and figuratively incubate policy entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs and financial entrepreneurs, all of whom are going to make the contribution to reforming the food system with an objective to create health and wealth. What we see in the opportunity that we've developed in Forever View in our aquaponics project is, as I said, an enormous amount. We were talking about this a little bit in the green room. An enormous amount of investor interest and enthusiasm. Private capital is eager to move to the points of reform that we are all seeking to drive in our food system. And our responsibility is to figure out how we can organize those resources, how we can remove barriers to innovation from a policy standpoint, how we can promote policy catalysts, how we can deal with the grossly misaligned incentive regime that governs our current food system, removal of subsidies and so forth, and how we can turn these things into catalysts for education and workforce development and job training, nutrition, and community wealth creation. That's the focus that we're trying to bring to bear here. So fundamentally, when we talk about access, what we're talking about is poverty. And if we can reorganize the food system in furtherance of wealth creation for as many people as possible, we will have done a good thing. And that's what each of these folks, I think, are fundamentally in the business of doing, is alleviating poverty in some form or fashion.
You're talking about a big ambition here. This is quite amazing. So,
Go big or go home.
yeah, go big or go home. To this point about the private capital and the investors, what kind of actors are these guys in this issue? Aren't they just in it to profit from it?
I hope so.
And is that enough?
It's a good start. Part of the challenge that we have is there isn't enough incentive. There isn't enough, certainly not enough policy incentive yet to bring enough private capital to bear to drive the kind of investment that creates sustainable job growth. If we are able to bring a lot of that investment capital to bear, I'll give you an example. There's a wonderful New York-based company called Bright Farms that's they just broke ground here in DC on an acre greenhouse. The mayor was there creating jobs in Ward 8, the ward that Mike was talking about. This is nothing but private investors. These are some West Coast folks, some folks from New York. These are fairly typical sorts of folks in the investment community that see the long-term opportunity here. And so we're really bringing this social mission to bear.
What do local people on the ground, the community, what do they think of investors like this?
My suspicion is that they're largely unaware of this community, but they'll be aware when the jobs are created in the neighborhoods where there are no jobs now.
How do you, to the other three of you, how do you, this question of the bottom-up sort of community activism, you've all made education, all of you, part of your platform and your work. How do you grow these community activists? I guess the question I'm trying to get at here is how will these things last into the future? I mean, how will either the corporate investment last? How will the education succeed so that generations to come will do this in this town?
I mean, to start at least, I'm sure there'll be more discussion about it. I do think that the only way to make these kinds of programs sustainable is to really have governmental buy-in on, for example, one of the things that DC is very blessed with is a forward-thinking city council that put the Healthy Schools Act into place and this is just one example, I think it's $200,000 behind school garden grants every year. So, and they made it so that the funding actually doesn't have to only be for infrastructure, it can actually be for staff time as well. So, I mean, because of that partnership with the city, schools are actually able to hire school garden coordinators that can be tasked with really going deeper, and it's not just sort of put on top of the shoulders of an over-tasked, under-prepared teacher. Without that partner, I mean, that's put DC in the forefront of school gardens because the city has become a partner. Also, we worked very hard to have city council put money behind the bonus incentive programs at farmers markets. So for FY14, there's now $200,000 in the city budget to help support matching programs at farmers markets across the city. Now that's a huge move. I mean, right now I think 14 markets in the city offer bonus incentive programs, and that is basically because there's 4 or 5 nonprofits out hitting the pavement trying to raise private money to support these programs that we know are having a huge impact on community health and where the money ricochets back into the local economy. So having the city step up as a partner means that these kinds of programs can be sustainable. And I am very hopeful that the prescription program will become one of these programs where on a much higher level, I mean, the whole country is talking about preventative health right now. We're talking about ways to tackle obesity and other chronic illnesses, before we're talking about dialysis. I mean, so I think, finding ways to take programs that we know work and have a real partnership with government so that these are sustainable programs that can really be scaled. Because, we're all working very hard to raise money so that we can do these programs, but without those partnerships, I think you can't go far enough. It's only proof of concept. Without those big partnerships, you can't make it as big as it should be.
I'm concerned with you.
Well, you might be.
No. I'm interested to see how you think it will all play out, because the problem with the food system as it is that it is profit driven, and that means driving costs down. And processed food companies have gotten rich by making poor people sick. And healthy food costs more than this processed food does for a number of reasons, some of them being market-driven and some of them being government subsidies, and some of it being intentional on the part of these companies who want to basically addict people to the salt, sugar, and fat that we're already sort of inclined to love as a species. So I hope that you're right about profits being the motivator that will begin to shift this, but I'm concerned that in the end, companies are about profits, and that means driving down cost. And
could I just throw something in there, because this is interesting, and I think really this is a very serious look in the mirror moment for grassroots organizations and nonprofits. To Marlon's point, DC Central Kitchen isn't in the business of fighting hunger. We're in the business of fighting poverty. We're not going to feed our way out of hunger. Food won't end hunger. It's not going to happen. We've been trying that for 60, 70 years, and look where we're getting. The line's just getting longer. We are trying ultimately to put ourselves out of business. And we have to, and we really have to be honest about that. So there are a couple things here. So take the school food stuff that we're doing. It's phenomenal business. It employs about 50 men and women that have graduated from our job training program, felons, addicts, homeless, chronically unemployed. It's generating about $3.5 million worth of revenue for DC Central Kitchen. It is fulfilling our mission in every possible way. But we're not in the food service business. And those businesses are in it for dollars. We're in it for change. And people, we provide school food now for 8 DC public schools and 2 others now. And Chartwells is the large institutional food service provider. And people have said, hey, Mike, are you interested in taking more of Chartwell's business? And I said, no, absolutely not. But I am very interested in changing their business. And if we can do that, if we can blow down these myths and these stereotypes and these preconceived notions that you can't possibly feed healthy, fresh food to kids, that you can't possibly employ felons, that you can't possibly pay a living wage and provide benefits and still make money, we're doing it. It might not be as much as all these other folks that, they don't care about the food. They make money. But if we can show it's possible, and then the dialogue starts to shift and elevate, for God's sakes, they should be able to do this better than we are. I mean, we're in the basement of the shabby-ass shelter, and we're doing this stuff. Are you kidding me? These multinational, they should be able to. Same thing for the corner stores. It's been a business decision based on some realities, but also some false assumptions. And if we can prove that create a business model for the Keeneys of the world, the coastal sunbelts of the world, to say, these guys are making money over here, I better get myself in on this business, then that's that moment as a nonprofit, as a grassroots organization, that we need to say, okay, next. We move on.
Right.
And there's a level above this, which is the reason why Chartwells is able to get away with that, is because they got the ear of the people who are writing the regulations that set the standard that allow them to serve substandard food. And so that's another area where money comes into it. And you know this better than I am. You're fighting a massive battle and trying to get, the reason that you're only in 8 schools is because there are regulations that drive the price down. What is it? How much is it per lunch?
Was it like
287 or 78.
It's in your pocket.
Yeah.
But I want to say, because people like to bash Chartwells. I mean, today.
Yeah, I'm not bashing.
No. But I just want to say, for the record, they have had enormous changes in response to outcries that happened around 2009, 2010. I mean, very big change. I mean, today, this happens to be Growing Healthy Schools Week also. I don't know if you're aware of that, which is one of the things that we help to coordinate. But today, Chartwells just harvested sweet potatoes from a DC public school from their garden and then served them in the cafeteria. So, I mean, they're trying. And it's because they're, everybody's saying, well, why can't you be more like DC Central Kitchen? And they said, oh, well, wow, okay, maybe we should try to do it a little more. And so I do just want to state for the record that things have improved, and we're very happy about that improvement.
I want to speak directly to Pam's very important point. The fact that we have the current system that we do comes much more as a matter of policy and far less as a matter of the market. And so part of the argument that we're trying to make, and this is why we have been so aggressive on working on SNAP incentives and working on different elements of the Farm Bill so that we can at least begin to push that boulder out of the way, push the policy boulder out of the way, and let the market actually work in a vastly more efficient and it will be healthier manner. When we decided to plant from, thank you Secretary Butts, from fence row to fence row, and we drove our country into the big productive middle of our country into this monocultural mess, right? That was a policy choice. So we got a lot of unraveling to do. Look, part of the theory of our case is that the healthiest ecosystem is the most biodiverse ecosystem. We need, as I said, policy, social, and economic entrepreneurs all to work together. And I think the beauty of the opportunity that we have here is that we can take the lessons that we've learned about SNAP incentives and the veggie prescription program, $125 million in the Senate bill that just got conferenced this afternoon, we hope, right? We'll see how the Farm Bill negotiations work out. $125 million in the Senate, we worked very hard to get that money in there. We've got the opportunity now to test a lot of these exciting innovations. These are the innovators.
Right.
We're all innovating in some form or fashion. So we got to remove the policy barriers to innovation. We've got to discover precisely what is working and scale that. But we've got to make sure that we push the market to work more efficiently. That is the way we're going to get the kind of scalable change that we seek. Otherwise, we're going to be pushing boulders uphill. We're going to feel very good about ourselves, but there are going to be a hell of a lot more people still sitting in poverty that don't need to.
And I heard Michel Nishan is the one of the founders of Wholesome Wave,
Right.
and I heard him say this, and it's really stuck with me. Most revolutions throughout history have been driven by hunger, and we're not going to see that here because we've found a way to produce food incredibly cheaply to fill people's stomachs for very little money. So you can be in poverty and still be eating. And I think that, if the revolution is not going to come through hunger because we found a way to stuff mouths, we need to find other ways of inciting that kind of revolution. So I'm not against having and I don't think any of us really are, as long as it's done, mindfully, having every player at the table.
Part of what we're trying to prove at Forever View is that we can drive literally more revenue per cubic foot growing healthy, sustainable produce than our current typical measure of yield per acre of corn, wheat, soybeans, cotton, rice, etc. That's how we think about the business. We're thinking about it very differently. If we can port this model of controlled environment agriculture to enough urban environments, guess what's going to happen? All of a sudden, you're going to have job creation happening close to where the people need it. That's why Bright Farms is setting up shop in Ward 8. That's the whole theory of the case. Let's bring healthy, sustainable production closer to the people that need it, and we're going to solve the jobs problem and some of these consumption challenges that we've had.
And the consumption challenge, though, is huge because we are in a habit for at least the last 30 years of eating stuff that is not food. It's food-like substances, but it is not food. And it's been engineered to make you want to eat it and to eat tons and tons of it, and that's what's behind the obesity crisis. And so we have to unravel that and get people eating actual food again. And that's where you especially come in, because if you can get the kids, that'll make a difference. But then you also parents have to be able to access it and afford it. And it's like this giant jigsaw puzzle, and everybody's got a piece, and we all have to jump in at exactly the same time and fit them all together.
But to that point, we're actually sort of working towards that right now, I think. These three organizations are going to be starting a DC Food Action Coalition to really focus energies on trying a pilot in collaboration with the DC Promise Neighborhood Initiative, which is modeled after Harlem's Children's Zone in the Parkside Kenilworth neighborhood, and really trying to think about, okay, each of our organizations, and then City Blossoms is also involved, and the Unity Clinic that's going to be at Parkside. We each have a program that we can deliver, and we are delivering across the city and sort of talking about how we're addressing the issue, and we all are in different ways, but what would it look like if we really sat down, pulled out all the stops, and put all of our best programs into a specific footprint where we can really track what that kind of synchronized effort would look like, and hopefully we'll have fantastic results.
Yeah, track and measure it. I mean, that's what I'm hearing from all of you, and especially Marlon, that you're using your farm as this way to really prove out the costs and benefits of this model. When will that happen? In another year or two? Do you have a timeline for that?
Yeah, I'm discovering that age-old lesson that you can make a small fortune in agriculture by starting with a large one.
Yeah.
Restaurant business is the same.
Yeah, and I didn't start with a large fortune, so by any stretch of the imagination. The monitoring and the measuring of all of these different processes are absolutely critical. I mean, the way that we look at it, we look back at the technology industry, the software industry. It's really, the computer industry is an interesting analog. You look at the 1950s and 1960s. In the aquaponics business, we're kind of where the computer business was in the 1950s. We're tinkering and toying and trying to figure out, the nitrification processing, what's going to grow well under what conditions and all the rest of it. So we've got an awfully long way to go. Now, our facility is going to be profitable probably by the end of year 3, to God's ears. But what will be, I think, more important will be working to create this opportunity at scale in an urban area so that we can begin really to drive the kind of change that we believe is possible in an urban setting.
Interesting also to hear, well, certainly, Mike, your recital of just the stark contrast of Ward 3, Ward 8, and Pam's ideas, it makes it sound as though really we're talking about food as an environmental justice issue, where it's like, well, we've been poisoning our sort of low-income, vulnerable communities with this monoculturally produced stuff that they eat to fill up, as Lauren was saying, and don't eat to nourish themselves. So that's really a very gasp moment. So who are your, if you could find one, I mean, you talked about the food service companies. If you could find other allies, who would they be? You've got yourselves, which is great. Obviously, there's a need for the district government, from what, Lauren, what you're saying, to really step up. Did Sustainable DC, did the food policy groups do anything for you guys, by the way?
I mean, we were involved, and I've sort of commented on them in panels. I mean, I think, it was a valuable networking opportunity, and I'm certainly happy that Sustainable DC exists, and there are some important where we have funding from Sustainable DC to roll out the environmental literacy plan citywide, together with the Anacostia Watershed Society and the DC Environmental Education Consortium. So there's been some financial support behind it. I think a lot of the goals that were listed in DC, particularly in the food section, we actually are kind of already there. Some of them were, sort of the long-term goal is that we'll have half of the schools in the city will have gardens, and there are 200 schools. We're at 93. I mean, I think it's shorter than a 5-year goal, so we're here already. And same with the bonus program citywide. I mean, it's been, I think, valuable to have something to point to when talking to city council to say, hey, this is in the mayor's Sustainable DC plan. This is something that we all should really be rallying around. It's
so interesting that you say you're ahead, in effect, of the way that perceptions are about these issues, because when you all were describing how you're breaking down the food desert, it occurred to me that, well, maybe the food desert as we know it really doesn't exist because you've broken it down by having the trucks coming through the corner stores, through the after-school farmers markets.
These are pinpricks.
Yeah.
Really?
And I also think that in DC particularly, it's an interesting case because, while there are 40 farmers markets, we sort of joke that there's more farmers markets per capita than any place in the country, and that these markets often have been put in by developers that are sort of saying, this is an up-and-coming neighborhood. Let's put in a farmer's market very quickly, to sort of show that it's up-and-coming, which means that for local communities living there, often a farmer's market is actually sort of a death knell for the neighborhood. It means, affordable housing is about to go. It's basically the equivalent of a Whole Foods moving, and Whole Foods is one of our sponsors. I don't mean any offense to Whole Foods.
Right.
They've been wonderful, and they're supporting Capital Crunch tomorrow with 10,000 apples to school. So, but you know what I mean. So it's I think there's some work that we are all doing. When I think of food access, obviously sometimes we think about proximity, right? We certainly think about affordability, and I think that we are all finding ways around that. But food access is also a sense of feeling welcome in a place, and I think that is something that we are all tackling still. That making sure that in the communities that don't have not historically had access to these kinds of fresh foods, that we're helping to make sure that they know that this can be for them.
So, and I think there's, the whole government piece of this is very interesting. Marlon was talking about the policy issues, where we are with the agriculture policy. What Omnivore's Dilemma is really all about is that our policy world is at odds with and in struggling with each other. So there's the big USDA over here who feeds on, quite literally, this monoculture that we've and the commodity programs and the commodity crops. And then there's the other USDA who's developing My Plate and saying you have to have better, fresher foods in schools, but we can't really pay for them because the money's coming from this other stuff over here. So it's a very wicked cycle. Mm-hmm. And an example about this corner stores thing is this program was started through a grant through the District of Columbia government, but it wasn't entirely practical because a couple people sitting in an office thought they knew what the program should look like and what should be important. And although there was a great deal of emphasis on fresh fruits and vegetables, a couple of people thought that the most important thing would be if we could put a fresh coat of paint on all the corner stores in the city, or do things that just, if you went and looked at these corner stores, you knew it couldn't happen. One of the requirements was do 30 stores and get 15 or 20 of them WIC certified. Well, to be a WIC certified store, it has to be 10,000 square feet or more. There's not a corner store in the District of Columbia that's 10,000 square feet, yet this was a requirement in the grant that could not be serviced or accomplished. Oh, and so there needs to be this larger discussion with government, who can absolutely play a catalytic role, but there needs to be a listening exercise going on to the folks on the front line that are doing the work.
Yeah, if I could just speak to exactly that point, and again, in the spirit of constructive dialogue, let me offer another provocative statement. Look, I was a chief of staff in the House of Representatives. I worked in the Senate. I worked in politics a long time. Folks, if we wait for policymakers to drive this process, we are cooked.
All right.
Okay? And if you don't believe me, read the headlines from the last 2 weeks. The misalignment of policy is, as Mike points out, ranges from the grotesque to the laughable. Our country, in a lot of ways, is sort of quietly at war with itself when it thinks about food and food policy, and this is why I think it's incumbent on all of us from our various perspectives to really drill into the central challenge of alleviating poverty. If we can focus our efforts in whatever space we happen to be working in, whether that's fixing the policy misalignments, or bringing private capital to bear, or creating fabulous education programs for kids, if we can focus these efforts on alleviating poverty, then what we'll be able to do is drive toward the root cause. And I can assure you, when that happens, the policymakers will come trickling along, very very, very quickly. But I'll gently take issue with my colleague. I don't want to wait for the city. I don't want to wait for the feds. I don't want to wait for anybody. We don't have time. We just don't have time.
Who's waiting?
Yeah.
But we need their help. I think to make these programs sustainable, I'm out, fundraising, we're all out fundraising, and, you can only serve as many people as you can raise private money to support. So I just think, and this is a conversation that's happening again and again, for smaller nonprofits that are really trying to be innovators in this field, in order to make these sustainable, we need alliances.
Mm-hmm.
I also think it's very interesting, and I've heard this come up quite a bit, I think some policymakers are starting to see the obesity epidemic as a national security issue, which it obviously is, and it seems to me that might be a kick in the pants in a way that some other things aren't. I don't know if your opinion, you're closer to the hill than I am, but.
Yeah, we hoped, and I think there's room for growth with policymakers in that space. The national security argument, the idea that 2/3 of 18-year-olds are unfit for military service as a result of obesity rates in the country. You would think that really would have put a fine point on it. Usually when you can get the Defense Department organized around it, at least then you've got scale. They may be going in the wrong direction, but at least you've got scale.
Right.
We just haven't quite broken through, and I think it goes to the point that both Mike and Pam have been making about how deep the wheel ruts are in the policy space on these issues, which again gets us back to the terrific innovations that everyone here is driving. These are all versions. These are all 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 of different types of policy innovations that are going to get us to the solution that we see.
To talk about, if you would, each of you, because it's a largely student audience or, perennial students, what students can do, how they can help further these goals, these common goals that you guys have, how they can involve themselves, what is the best way?
Well, I can speak specifically with our organization if that's what you
Sure.
mean. One
Either of
thing
your
that we
organization in
realized,
general.
one of our board members is general counsel for Food Corps, and which, in case you're not aware of it, it's it's basically a branch of AmeriCorps that helps place people into food-related school situations, whether it's school gardens or farm-to-school work. So what she told me was that it was actually harder to get a position with Food Corps than to get into Harvard last year, because the demand is so immense from students coming out of school wanting to get involved in these issues, because everyone read The Omnivore's Dilemma and they're taking classes on it and they're thinking about it in ways that we never did when we were their age. And we had a real aha moment around that, which was, here we're working with 50 garden-based educators who are telling us what their issues are, and one of their issues is they don't have enough hands in the garden. And hey, we've got a whole lot of colleges and universities in DC with a student population that would love to get their hands in the dirt, work with kids, have a kind of applied way to do this. So we set up a school garden internship program where college students work 8 to 10 hours a week. We pair them with a school garden coordinator in one of the schools that's in our network, and they're getting hands-on training. They come to they're open to come to any of the trainings that we have for the school garden coordinators, and we feel like through that we're not only supporting the garden educators, but we're also training the next generation of school garden coordinators that can fan out. So we're always looking for people to get involved in that. And we were actually just talking today, through Growing Healthy Schools Week, we've been coordinating chef demos across the city, and sort of having also average everyday home cooks come in and lead lessons with kids doing really hands-on food prep. And we want to really expand that program, so there's going to definitely be a place for extra hands that are people who like to cook and like kids. We'd love to talk to you also.
So I would, coming at that from the reverse, one would be, don't start another nonprofit. We've got plenty. And I think one of the things that I know all of us are trying to do desperately trying to do, and funders ask about this, and it's one of the big buzzwords, is collaboration. How can we collaborate? And I think we probably do more of it than we think. A lot of it is happening in the people in this space particularly, I think are motivated for the right reasons. But one of the things, I was talking to a group not too long ago, and someone was asking about that, and I said, we for years we've considered, we're open source. People come to visit us, they stay with us, they spend time with us, they take what they want, they leave what they don't, and they move it somewhere else to their community. But the idea of thinking about collaboration is one of the things that just drives me batty. Of all the things that we're doing, whether it's fundraising or coming up with new programs or making current programs sustainable, just staffing issues, all of these things we deal with every day, to take a step back and say, how can I do more collaborating? I think a very valuable tool would be someone coming into a community and really saying, okay, this is what we got going on. Let's get everyone around this table. And this is what Lauren was talking about what we're trying to put together. But help everyone that's in this space think bigger about where they are and the role they play and how we can all do that a little better together. But it's hard for on the ground doing it every day to step back and do that.
And that's one of the gaps that DC Greens is also trying to fill. And I think, we are basically trying to be a space for collaboration, best practices, sharing across institutions, and hopefully we'll be able to push that even further because there are wonderful DC nonprofits that exist. And you're right, see what's there before you go and start something new because you read Omnivore's Dilemma.
They've covered the gamut of that. I'd like to speak to you not as students, but as people. You guys go to NYU, most of you, I guess, which means you occupy a demographic level of our society that gives you a lot of power, economically and socially and politically. And I hope you'll use that for good instead of ill. And on the economic side, vote with your dollar for the food system that you want to have. Opt out of the processed and packaged foods. You will change that market, and in fact, it is changing. Organics is the single largest growing sector of the food. Words are escaping me. I'm on some meds. It's the single largest sector of the food economy that's growing and continued to grow throughout the recession. So, as more people continue to demand well-grown food, more businesses will get into it, and the more that you can drive that just from a personal perspective, the better the food system will be for everyone. And as you all evolve to your new food system here, demand it every day. When you start putting money into that, again, you're going to shape the market forces, and these companies that you're so excited about are going to see that the money is here, and they will start doing that. But when you're opening up your ramen noodles and your weird packaged mac and cheese, which I've never made in my life, just understand that you are encouraging that to be made for everyone. You can make better choices and should. And I don't mean to be a scold, I'm sorry.
I would respond in a couple of ways. I'd say, first, pursue your passion, pursue what you love, study what motivates you. If that's engineering, if that's architecture, it's design, if it's policy, inevitably, any of these disciplines, both in and of themselves, and more importantly, across disciplines, can be brought to bear on food system reform and in dealing with the challenges that we see. Indeed, they must if we're going to be successful. So I would say pursue your passions, drill deep, become an expert, and then come up and be as interdisciplinary as you possibly can so that you can make the contribution to food system reform that we see. That's point one. And point two would be apply for an internship at foodpolicy.us.
There we go.
Those would be my two bits of advice.
Let me check the time. I actually have a couple questions for you, but we do need to go to questions, don't we? Who in the audience, or do we have questions from the square? Not yet? New York, we invite your questions. Audience. There's one in the front, and then we'll go to the back.
Well, thank you for all of your great comments. I have two hopefully quick questions. I guess the first one is actually for Mike. I'm wondering how you've seen the conversation around all of this change and evolve in the last 25 years, just given that you've been so close to all this for so long here. And then you guys have all touched on sort of supply chain logistics, I think, tangentially through, the access piece. I'm just wondering, I've heard of some work being done in urban settings on sort of that last mile of supply chain and distribution. I just don't know if there's anything like that happening in DC or if that conversation is.
Well, so to the conversation point, and I'm not sure if we're talking exactly just about the sustainable piece or where the kitchen came from in terms of hunger. And that's ultimately what the kitchen is about. We're not about feeding people. We do that, but we're about elevating the discussion and encouraging that discussion. For years, the discussion in America has been, if you're hungry, it's your own fault. If you don't have a job, you're lazy. And we've worked, like many, many other organizations around the country, have worked really hard to try to get past that. But I think, again, you don't have to look very far in the newspaper or the internet or the television to see that discussion really hasn't moved a whole lot. And it's tragic because it's not that way. This idea that the American dream is easily accessible for anyone who wants it, and if you're not living it, it's just your own damn fault because you're not willing to get up out of bed and just grab it. Nothing could be farther from the truth. So I do think that the work that, because of this new movement of this food idea and the sustainability and a move back to the agriculture where we all came from, I think is going to help that move forward. And I do believe that the conversation is elevating and expanding, but we still have a long way to go.
On the second piece, we're actually in the process of creating a food hub, which is probably a word that you've heard. We've got a great partner that has all the logistics down, and we're just sort of waiting for some funding to come together, and then hopefully we will be doing that last mile, serving the full gamut of customers from folks that the mobile market serves. The mobile market is already considered by the USDA as a food hub, but we're looking for some efficiencies to do it in a proper way, and hopefully free up our mobile market to do more stops instead of having to drive beautiful country lanes and picking up pastured eggs. So that is something that we are working towards, and if you're interested in it, please let us know, because I'm sure there's going to be some volunteer opportunities.
Thank you for the conversation. Question around culture and food culture in DC. Is DC ready for kind of this change? Is there somebody there to kind of macro see this entire food policy? And I know somebody had talked about potentially a group being started, but is this being institutionalized? Are we actually thinking about this like other communities in the United States? And then to the food hub, I wonder, when I look at the food hub, I think of it as a wholesale distributor, kind of like but are we thinking about anything on the retail side, which is what is affecting probably most consumers?
The purpose of our food hub on one level is to better serve our mobile market, because it's an inefficient way of gathering the food that we need, and so that serves retail customers. There are also the corner store program that Mike has been talking about. The reason that corner stores don't carry the food is because a distributor it's not worth their time unless they're going to be moving a certain volume of fresh food. They're not going to bother going there. And the store isn't going to move that much food, so they're kind of out of luck. So a food hub with a sort of nonprofit piece to it, with the notion of a social mission, can make sure that food makes it that last mile to those stores, beyond those that are involved just in that corner store program. And then the system that we're working out is a stepped system where our top retail customers who are buying really extraordinary food that we're picking up locally, which is the same food that we're selling on our mobile market, will pay for it at a price that's similar to what they're paying at the fancy farmers market down across from the White House. And then we'll use the money that we get from that to help subsidize the sales to other folks so that other people with less money can have access to the same quality of food. So it's a still evolving concept, but that's kind of the big picture.
To your first question, I think that something that DC really lacks is a food czar, or a sort of and this is something that's also come up in several conversations recently. I'm sure you know, Gus Schumacher has been talking about this quite a bit because, there's a council of mayors that come together to discuss food issues, and DC just doesn't have an individual who is sort of tasked with overseeing and streamlining all of these different food pieces, and that's something that is desperately needed, I think. Some people might think that's sort of bloat, but I think that there's really a gap. We have a lot of us have the ear of city council, and people see that this is an important role, but we really need somebody who's charged with just thinking about food. I think that's what you're asking about, and I think we're not there yet, but we're pushing towards it. Is that what you meant?
Even if something went through now, or do we have that culture here from a food perspective, like Seattle, San Francisco, Cambridge, that already is at the point where the culture is pushing it. It's not just a few people; it's the entire society who's asking, wanting.
I think that we're getting pretty close. I would say that we're getting closer and closer. I mean, no. I mean, I think what we're finding through, again, I'm speaking from the school's perspective. These farmers market, the school garden pilot. I mean, these are making profits in low-income communities. So I mean, there's a growing desire, and I think the more that we're working with kids also to plant seeds with them and have them, watching it grow, we're getting there. I think that one of the gaps in our work, from my perspective, and something, again, that comes up at several meetings, is parent engagement, and really trying to kind of crack that piece of it, so that, we're sure that the kids who are coming up through it are also getting that support, and are actually accessing the options that they have available to them. So, we've been trying to think through a school-based prescription program that would work with school nurses and engage families, things like that. So, I mean, I think maybe we're not 100% there, but we're getting closer and closer. And I certainly wonder if in the cities that you mentioned, if every member of the populace is pushing for it either.
Yeah. There's food deserts in Seattle.
Let me offer sort of a historical perspective. I would argue that DC has a food culture. It is distinct. It is unique. Its roots are southern. The African American community in this town, and now in the inner ring suburbs, has a wonderfully rich food culture. Now, too much of it is being lost generationally. But there's a wonderful phrase that I hear that my friends use quite a bit. It's grandma on them, and there is a community of there's a culinary community there that's second to none in America, and I'll stack DC up against any town, any time. I think what's wonderful about what has happened as a cultural matter over the last 20 or so years is that culture is being leavened and added onto and enriched by the extraordinary diversity of new tastes and experiences and communities that are bringing their food culture and history and cuisines to bear on the culture of food in DC. But I think that, so I hope that addresses a slightly different piece of the question, but there are lots of places you can go to see that and to taste it.
But so much of it has been lost generationally because people haven't had access to food to cook. It's just been packaged food for the last 30 years. And so the grandmothers haven't been able to teach the granddaughters.
That's exactly right.
And that's what we're dealing with on the bus a lot. People have no idea even how to cook collards or kale or anything beyond apples and lettuce.
Hi, can I go?
Okay,
I have a mic.
this will be our final question.
My name is Adam. I'm from LA, and I was working on a community garden project there. And then when we surveyed the community as a neighborhood center, we found that it wasn't fresh foods that was a pain point. It was actually like beans, flour, oil, rice. That was the actual pain point that it was too expensive. So we tried to negotiate with the local markets to be like, can you provide these staple foods at a discounted price? And we initially had support of the mayor. It was a smaller city. It wasn't the city of LA. It was a city in the outskirts. And then election season came, and then he sort of dropped support. But I was wondering, have you guys been able to come up with a solution for that? Is that a pain point with the communities you serve here? Like, how do you make that cheap? Because you can't grow those, right?
Right.
So how do you provide that at a sustainable price?
I think it is a different situation because we don't have the growing season that you all have in Southern California. And so we don't have the tradition of backyard gardens necessarily that's really taking hold here. So what we see on the mobile market is fresh food is the issue. The other stuff, anything shelf stable, they're generally able to get. And the population that we're serving is almost entirely on SNAP. So they can get it discounted. I just think it might be a geographic difference.
You done? Thank you so much, panelists. Let's